everyone. This is Amy Zawi with a Red Alert special report, Communion and Connectedness with Israelis and people in the Holy Land. And today we have a returning guest, Jonathan Feldman of the Genesis 123 Foundation. You may recall we had him on in the spring when there was an art contest for children. And that was a beautiful time to have him on and explain that partnership and outreach. But today we invited Jonathan, who lives in Israel, to update us all on the perspectives, the feelings, the emotions, and the happenings in Israel, what we can be praying for and what we can do to help. And we also have Shelley Neese, our president, in here with us as we are both eager to hear what Jonathan has to share with us. Jonathan, welcome. And if you want to just remind our viewers a little bit about where you are and your organization, and then we'd like to ask you some questions about how things are going where you are.
Great. So I'll start with the second part. I'm the president of the Genesis 123 Foundation, which has as its mission, and this is a good context for this conversation, its special mission to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel. And in that way, well, you're both in the new book that I can't wait to get you, Israel the Miracle. It's sitting on a dock in the northern part of Israel right now, waiting to get out. And I'm the only Orthodox Jewish host of a weekly podcast called Inspiration from Zion on the Charisma Podcast Network, which is fun. And and basically everything that I live and breathe and dream about is building bridges between Jews and Christians. And so it's in that context that when the war started, the current operation, because I think that we're still fighting the same war. It's the War of Independence. It's 75 years later, just another battle, but a horrific battle. When it started October 7th, by the morning of the 8th, we had already launched an emergency campaign. Anyone who wants to check out what we're doing can go to genesis123.co and also be in touch. But I'd like to speak more personally today because I'm overwhelmed, and I mean that in a really positive way, but also in an overwhelming way with the number of people. And because I have the privilege of connecting with Christians all over the world, emails and text messages and WhatsApps and through any social media possible, asking, how are you? How are you? How are you? And honestly, it's a hard question to answer because early on, I said, I'm grieving, I'm fearful, and I'm angry. I'm also I'm a lot inspired. I'm inspired by the way Israelis have come together, and I'm inspired and grateful for the tremendous support that we're seeing from Christians all over the world. I mean, my heart is racing thinking about it. It's tremendously emotional. And that's all. And so people, out of the goodness of their heart, want to know what's going on. Can you tell me more? And honestly, day to day, very little has changed except for, okay, now we've gone in with ground forces. Today we had a rocket 4 minutes after I left my house, air raid siren here in my community in Efrat. You asked where I am in Efrat in the Judean mountains, just south of Jerusalem, 15 minutes away and no traffic. And I was 6 minutes from home when the air raid siren, I found out that there was an air raid siren here, but where I am now in my home, but I didn't hear it on the highway. But I saw the explosion from the Iron Dome knocking down two missiles that had come in. And if they hadn't been intercepted, ironically, may have very well gone to Bethlehem. That was sort of, it seemed to me that it was on that trajectory. So that's where I am on a personal basis, or I should say more on a national basis. But on a personal basis, it's real hard because on that very first day, it was Shabbat, so we were offline. We knew something had happened because we were jolted out of bed with an air raid siren here that morning on October 7th. But we stayed offline because it wasn't for us something that we perceived that was life-threatening. And until my son came in the house at 4 o'clock, he's turning 25 next month. Until he came, oh, and he's a newlywed. He's married all of 4 months. Until he came in at 4 o'clock to say he had just been called up, he needed his uniform and he needed his equipment. We had no idea what was going on. And certainly at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, on October 7th, we had no idea how bad it was or would be. We
Oh,
assumed that whatever was going on, because of what my son-in-law does, in a combat unit also, but in a more of a intelligence kind of perspective that we don't fully understand. We're not allowed to know. We assumed he was called up immediately, and he was, but he had to hold back because the base that he was going to was one of the ones that was initially impeached by terrorists. So they were calling people up, but they were saying, "Don't come yet." And in addition, so I have a daughter with three children, five and under, who's home alone mostly. My son-in-law's come home three times for about 12 hours. My son has come home once or twice, once I think, in the last three or so weeks. And we hope he's getting out this Shabbat, but we don't know. And I have a daughter who's got a very serious boyfriend, and it never occurred to me that she would be as traumatized, as worried, having nightmares. I mean, my daughters are in their 20s. They had to have a sleepover the first week of this war. It's two of my daughters sleeping in the same room together because they just needed that comfort of being one of being. And so what we're feeling when Israelis ask me, "How are you doing?" which is sort of a kind of a knee-jerk thing to ask. My response is, I'm no worse off than anyone else here. Today, one of my daughters went to the funeral of a soldier who was killed on the northern border. They've been to, I don't know how many funerals and mourning houses of other people who have died. Another young man from our community was killed on the first day, and his funeral took place about a week later. We're all traumatized and dealing with it the best we can in our different ways.
What was that like, Jonathan? So you're saying it was 4 p.m. on October 7th before you learned what had happened. What was that experience like? Were you just playing catch up at that point to see how did you and your wife process? By that point, I'm sure you were capable of getting a pretty good amount of information.
Well, the information we got was just from him coming in and saying that the Hamas broke across the border and broke into a number of communities. And if I remember correctly, it's all kind of a blur. He said 100 people had been killed. So that, of course, nobody knew about all of the other 1,300. And I don't even know if we knew about hostages being taken. But really, Shelley, it's a good question, and it's hard because as a parent, wow, our job is to protect our kids. And in 10 minutes, my son was in the house in uniform, carrying all of his heavy equipment, us trying to throw non-perishable foods in his bag that he could take, with him telling us, no, don't take it because everything you put in my bag I have to carry. And we had no idea what was going on. But I'll tell you, we it's a terrifying thing to see your child go off in a situation in combat where if called, he will go into combat across the border. Um, Already once his cell phone was taken away, which was an indication to us that he might be doing something particularly dangerous. Um, the other day when he asked what his blood type was, I mean, that's just not sort of yeah, right? That's just not a random question. How's the weather? Oh, and what's my blood type?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Mm-hmm.
when he, it's hard to revisit it all. When he came in and is on his way out, he said to my wife and I, "Don't worry, I'll be fine,"
Mm-hmm.
which is what a brave Zionist, proud Israeli soldier would and should say. And as soon as the door shut, my wife looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Yeah, you wait till your son goes off to that." And I looked, we were on the seventh floor of an apartment building, and he went downstairs, and I yelled something to him, make sure, did you forget this? Did you forget that? And about 2 minutes later, he was picked up by a little black car, and I saw him just driven off. And you know, we're very lucky,
Mm-hmm.
but everyone's fearful.
Mm-hmm. Is your particular community So if you're south of Jerusalem, it just seems like every pocket of Israel, whether or not you're in the north, south, or in the middle of the country, you have vulnerabilities no matter what. What would be just the geographical concerns of how the conflict spills into your community?
Right. So on that first day, we were waking out of bed. Outside the window behind me is an air raid siren about 50 yards away, and that's loud. Boy, that's loud. And that's not a nice way to get out of bed. You know how when you're in a deep sleep and your alarm clock goes off? Ooh, this is much worse. And we are 40 miles east of the Gaza of the corner of the Gaza border, so easily 45 to 50 miles from where they're shooting the rockets. But that day, we were sent into the bomb shelter, if I remember correctly, at least 4 times. Two of my daughters who have their own apartments in Jerusalem, which is also very close, live in older buildings. They don't even have bomb shelters. They have to go to the stairwell and protect themselves there. Um, and that happened for them several times. So that's how we knew something dramatic was happening, because it's very rare that they shoot rockets this far. And we had rockets pretty much on a daily basis for the first week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. And then it stopped, and we assumed maybe they were saving their rockets for another time, or maybe they ran out of ones. It's amazing how many they still have because they're firing them every day. We didn't know, but today, like I said, pulled out of the house, 4 minutes out of town, and the sirens go off. Um, we're in range. Obviously, we're in range from Gaza, but the bigger concern is the 150,000 expected rockets that Hezbollah has in the north, which I don't think I'm sharing anything that I shouldn't. It's like a public secret, but um, even when the Iron Dome is as effective as it is only taking out 90% of the rockets. So if Hezbollah were to shoot off a battery of much more powerful long range, and some cases even GPS guided missiles, I said to a friend the other day, if they had my name on one, they could take my apartment out. Um, I'm assuming I'm not one of their targets, but yeah, so that's a big fear. That's a big concern, because from Lebanon, pretty much all of Israel is in range, and that doesn't even include Iran. And I don't know if you're aware, but even at the beginning of the war, the Iranian militias in terrorists, excuse me, in Yemen fired a relatively long range missile at us.
So what is it? What is going on in your, I mean, just phrase this not delicately, but sensitively, like when you're in your communing with your friends and your neighbors in your building, or maybe on the street, you go into are the shops open? Are you able to, do kind of normal errands, and do you have supplies, groceries,
Yeah.
and is that still kind of business as usual, or are you noticing,
It's a
the
good question. It's a good question, and you can't not ask me anything. Anything's on the table. It's fine. It's fair game. That's not where I thought you were going when you tried to preface it by being sensitive. For the first, again, without precision, 2.5, maybe even 3 weeks. I mean, well, I guess we're 23, 4, 5 days into the war now. Um, for the first half of it, easily, it was not business as usual. Jerusalem was a ghost town, really. And I felt like when I was in Jerusalem, I didn't leave home because I didn't have any particular place to go, and we all felt we needed to be close to home and close to our own bomb shelter. But when I did go out and I would be in Jerusalem, I felt like I was living Lamentations, Jerusalem being desolate, and fearful. Not as bad, but it was still really, really horrifying. Um, Now things are much more back to normal. Um, Shops are open. That first week, I don't remember why I was in Jerusalem. Oh, I had to deliver a copy of the Israel the Miracle, the book that you're in, to one of the authors who happened to be in Jerusalem. And I ran into a grocery store that's part of a mall. The mall was closed. There were no stores open in the mall, nothing at all. The grocery store was open. Supplies have been erratic. There, because think about it, even the whole supply chain with produce, with milk, with fresh dairy products, with fresh meat, all of it has to be delivered, and more than 5% of our population is currently serving in the army. So you have a lot of positions. My youngest son went to volunteer working in a bakery because they couldn't keep up with business. Now it feels more back to normal. I just in Jerusalem today. I needed to go to the mall. Stores are open. I was able to run in and out and get something for my wife and get myself a new printer. And things are kind of back a pace. I'll tell you this: we've avoided going to the local grocery store that has a lot of Arab employees. I actually wrote an article about a degree of this. Nobody really wants to be around Palestinian Arabs right now. Fear, distrust, anger. And yesterday, yeah, I went into the store because it was convenient, and I noticed some of the Arab workers, perhaps deliberately, wearing a particularly large cross around their neck as if to say, we're not them.
Mm.
But I didn't ask them. I didn't interview. I was polite, but it's uncomfortable. So for us, where we are, sure, there's norm, but we're also, through our emergency fund, sponsoring dozens of people who have been evacuated from their home from the first week and can't go back. They're afraid to go back because as much as we have a minute and a half warning from an air raid siren, they have 15 seconds. So for the first week or 10 days, the kids couldn't even leave the house. They couldn't leave the bomb shelter. There's so many rockets. So you saw kids show up to Jerusalem traumatized. Schools are coming back online. Not universities yet. Universities have been deferred at least until the beginning of December. I'm forgetting all the other things. There are many things that aren't normal, and a lot more people are unemployed because tourists aren't coming. So anything connected to the tourism industry, which is big here, is basically shut down. We're trying to get by. And everyone's dealing with the trauma differently. These are good opportunities that I appreciate because on a day-to-day basis, my response to the trauma is to double down on my work. And I don't get opportunities to speak for the sake of speaking and to speak to friends like you.
Jonathan, I'm curious, in that line, has it been a different experience for you versus your Israeli friends? Because you have so many Christian relationships or relationships with Christians that you're hearing support from them, but you're also seeing what your Israeli friends are seeing, which is a turning of the world opinion away from Israel. So are you able to encourage those Israelis who don't have as many Christian relationships that we do have friends?
I'm glad you asked that question, Shelley, because the answer is yes. I am, and I do. And there's this one in 40 minutes from now, there's a group of Swedish Christians who have been praying for Israel for 15 minutes on Zoom every day. And they've invited me, and I've invited my Jewish friends because, my gosh, it's so uplifting. I cherish those 15 minutes. It's incredible, and I am particularly deliberate about in my social media posts and the articles that I'm writing, going out of my way to do briefings with Christian groups to invite Jewish friends to see and be part of it, because we need that encouragement now. Here's a great example of it. The people that we've helped pay for being in the hotel for the last 2 weeks and food and all the other activities, and a dear friend of mine has stepped up to turn his interior design and architecture showroom next to their hotel into a kind of a clubhouse for families that they come in and do activities every night. And many of his relatively high net worth clients have been donating money for sponsoring all of it alongside with many Christians. But these people who were helping until this war started, or until they were evacuated to Jerusalem, more precisely, they'd probably never even met a Christian. And they love the idea, and it's important. Tonight, right now, I know I hear out in the kitchen my daughters. I just happen to feel in the mood to make a big pot of soup today, just to have, because it's getting chilly. So my daughter called me tonight and said, "Can we go out and give it to soldiers? Because there are a lot of soldiers that are stationed here." And I said, "Yeah, absolutely. Just let them know it's coming from the Genesis 123 Foundation, and we're supported by Christians. I want everybody to know that." And let me just add one other thing. It's an article that I'm trying to frame because it's so important. I think it's fair to say that even though you are perfect examples, really, of Christian support for Israel and the Jewish people, and that's been going on for decades, thank God, and more in recent decades. But it's a phenomena that's not new anymore. But most Jews don't understand for many reasons. I contend that this situation that we're in, this war, has ramped that level of support up on steroids, because the good and evil, the black and white, has never ever been more visible. And I think, what a shame 80 and 85 years ago, 90 years ago, Christians in Europe didn't step up the way Christians are now. But I think this is the historic high ever of Christian support for Israel and the Jewish people. And that needs to be explained to my Jewish friends. Oh, last thing, here's a great scenario. The other night we did a barbecue for the evacuees outside their hotel. And we got lots of local Jewish friends and neighbors to come and do the grilling and serving and preparing and cleaning. And there's one person who showed up who's been very critical of my work with Christians, doesn't think I should be doing what I'm doing. And when this person left, I'm trying to be very careful not to say this person's gender, could not be more effusive and inspired and grateful. Without my saying, "Hey, by the way, this is Christians helping," this person understood that, and that's real important to me also.
That's good to hear.
I think Shelley and I share in the goal on our broader mission statement is that idea of reconciliation, and I'm sad that it takes such an event to even in the Christian community. There was a lot of Christians that, "Oh yeah, I support Israel, of course, the Jews to be safe," and now they have to actually come to the reality of, what does that mean? What is my faith? What is it in my faith that gives me that position? And then how do I act on that mandate? And so there's a huge learning curve going on both sides, but for the good, I hope, right?
It is.
And that's why we were so excited that you had time for us, because Shelley and I really want to make sure that in the next few weeks and without an end time, have as many folks in Israel that are willing to talk to us and share their personal perspective and experience, because it's beyond just reading an article, which are good, and I share the articles, and we have a curated list of articles, but we also need that personal connection to say, tell us your story.
War has faces.
Yeah, I welcome this anytime you want to have me back, and anyone who wants to reach out. The caveat is I just don't have the time and bandwidth or energy to respond to everybody. So I'm so grateful for you for giving me this opportunity, because it is therapeutic. This is something I do need to do. But you also have the opportunity to magnify the impact of that and make it personal. And just know and let Christians know that it matters, everything. I've been getting people calling me to apologize for donating as little as $1. One woman from California called and said she was sorry she couldn't do more than $3.44. It's a number I'm never ever going to forget. But the amazing thing is there have been so many of these donations $1, $2, $3.44, $5, $10. It really all adds up. And that enables me, on behalf of everybody, to do really good, impactful things.
Mm-hmm. I would say as an appeal for any donors that are visiting your website too, that for any nonprofit leader, it doesn't matter what you give, but please give it consistently so Jonathan can budget accordingly.
Well, yes, but this is an emergency campaign, and we're not taking operating costs or things out of that. Down the road, people who are now new donors on our database will have an opportunity to hear for ongoing things, and it's only because we exist that we can be making the impactful, tangible things that we're doing now. But right now, I mean, even the book tour that I was supposed to leave tomorrow,
Wow.
yeah, that's not happening. So, because I can't leave. I can't leave a country at war with in general, but with my son and son-in-law. No.
Well, I think that books right now could be part of, Amy and I have been talking about how do we boycott Israel? How do we support Israel through, I know businesses, this is a hard time. So books are a great way to do that. And we'll certainly link to the book that can be purchased from your website. And all Israeli authors, this is just a great time to support Israeli businesses. Even, Trader Joe's garlic and ginger is from Israel. So there's lots of ways that Americans can keep supporting the Israeli economy as well, because we all know that there needs to be a future day in Israel after that, where it is hopefully back to normal.
Right.
Jonathan, I'm going to, as we discussed your program and your website, I will be sharing those screenshots and URLs so folks will have access to those. And we really thank you for taking the time to come on, and we absolutely will invite you back to give us updates. And we will be sharing, as always, sharing your articles and your foundation's social media posts will reshare on our feed. So those of you who follow that will always stay up to date with Jonathan's activities and perspectives.
Thank you.
I'm praying for your family members fighting too.
Yes, we are going to keep your family members in our prayers, and your community, and we would, just know that you have this network of prayer warriors in America, and that's not going to waver.
No, it's not. And by the way, it's not just in America. You are amazing, the two of you and your network, but I am doing this in Africa and Europe and Asia. So,
praise God.
Yeah. So,
it's global.
And I just want all of my Jewish Israeli friends and people I don't even know to get a taste of this, because it really is so encouraging.
Well, thank you again, Jonathan.
And thank you, Jonathan. We're praying for you.
We are.
Appreciate it. God bless you both.
Bye-bye.